All right, here we go on Hold My Banner. We are joined by basketball royalty, the icon, Mitch Kupchak, joining us here on Hold My Banner with Travis Thomas and Ante Campbell. And I want to start here, Mitch. We appreciate you joining us, and I know everyone thinks about you, the executive. But, sir, I have your resume right in front of me here in terms of a player. I think people forget or either don't know how prolific you were as a player. You won a gold medal, 3 championships, many individual accolades in your playing career. So I want to start there. Talk to me about Mitch, the basketball player. Give me a scouting report. Respectfully, you were before my time, so I didn't get a chance to see you play. I know the executive, but I want to know Mitch, the player.
Well, the player did okay until college, and then he got hurt a lot. So I was able to make it through my college, and you can see the Tar Heel, right? So I was able to make it through my college career, and I had a little bit of an injury situation with my back, but and then in Washington, which are now the Wizards, but at that time they were the Bullets. I continued to have a problem. And then, of course, in Los Angeles, I had a knee problem that really set me back quite a bit. So, I had a lot of injuries. I ended up getting credit for playing 10 years. Back then it was a different game. Everything was about getting the ball as close to the basket as possible, which was great because, I'm a big man and I like to get the ball close to the basket, down on the low block. And that's really how the offenses started. And then my first couple of years in the NBA, they didn't even have the three-point shot. So that gives you an idea what the game was all about back then. And I had a couple of good years in Washington in 1978, with a really good team, Wes Unseld, Elvin Hayes, 2 Hall of Famers, and Bobby Dandridge, another Hall of Famer. We did win a championship in 1978. We got beat in 1979. And that was fulfilling. I was young. I think I was 23 or 24 years old. And then in LA, despite the injuries, I ended up playing on a team that won a championship in 85. Ironically, right against the Boston Celtics, which is where you guys are right now. And at the time, I had a big brace on, and I kind of lumbered up and down the court. I was backing up Kareem rather than being a starter. So it was a different role for me. The Celtics had this hold on the Lakers where they had never beaten the Celtics. And I think they played 8 or 9 times in the 60s when, Jerry West and Elgin Baylor and Will Chamberlain. So in 85, when we finally won a championship, it was pretty big. And for me personally, it was very fulfilling.
Yeah, Mitch, it's crazy that you brought that up, your time with the Lakers, because that's exactly where I want to go. I need you to take me back to 1986, before I was born, Mitch. Game 5, you had that fight with Hakeem Olajuwon. What was going on in your head during that time and the days after? Because that ended up being the last game that you played in the NBA.
Well, NBA fights aren't fights. They're kind of scuffles. They last for about 15 seconds. Nobody really wants to fight, right? And before you know it, everybody's pulling everybody else off the pack, right? 86, that team was trying to defend the title in 85, and something was amiss. I don't know, chemistry or what, but we just... we didn't have the same fight or togetherness or chemistry that we had the year before. And I think that was the second round. Ralph Sampson, Hakeem, they had a really, really good team. Hakeem was just starting out. And I think we got beat, and like you said, 5 games, right? So, for me personally, like I mentioned, I was often injured, and I was coming back from another surgery in January, and I already made my decision to come back, because it was defending a title. I already made my decision to come back and try to win the title one more time, and then to retire. So, I knew it was nobody else really knew that except me. So I knew I was playing every game I played would be the last game I played in of that, you know, relevance, right?
Right.
And that ended up being my last game. Not the kind of way you want to go out.
Mm-hmm.
We were good enough to repeat, but we just couldn't get there. Jerry West came up to me in the locker room at a later date. I don't know if we were clearing out our lockers or whatever, and he used to watch me run up and down the court with that brace on, and he knew I had another surgery and ice and all that. And he kept on saying to me, Mitch, you don't have to keep on doing this. I can use some help in the front office. So when he said that, I just jumped at it. And the NBA was different back then. There was nobody in the front office. There was one scout, one GM. And I don't know if he really needed the help or not, or if he was just trying to get the roster spot. I don't know. But for me, I jumped at it and ended up being, not that I made a great decision because I had already decided, but for me to be able to work for him for 14 years, right, learn the trade, and then, of course, he retired. I stayed there another 17, 18 years as the GM and then came here to Charlotte. So, yeah, I mean, I had an NBA career as a player, and I had some success. But it turns out my career in the front office was just as fruitful to me and went a lot longer. So I'm very thankful.
Yeah, we're going to get into your career as an exec, but I want to kind of stay there where you just left off at the genesis of it, where you got a chance to work with Jerry West. I mean, what were some of those core principles that you learned from him early on that did, Mitch, carry over into the rest of your career as an executive? What were some of the early things you learned from Jerry West and you were able to sort of stick with you the rest of the way?
Right. Well, other than the obvious, we were two different kinds of people, right? Putting aside our careers, we were very different. He was, much more instinctive, thought things through, but followed his instincts, and he knew to do that. I was much more deliberate, more thoughtful, maybe even overthinking things before I decide what to do. But if I have to come up with one thing, it would be, especially as the profession grew and you had a lot more people around you giving you advice and trying to help you. You can get sidetracked by talking to too many people, and if there's somebody that has a big voice in the room, you could unknowingly be swayed, right? So the one thing that I think I learned most would be to follow your instincts, take in, all kinds of advice that people may give you. Of course, you pay those people to do it. But at the end of the day, if your gut is telling you to do something, you should do it. And at least maybe you're right half the time and you could say, I followed my gut. But even if you're wrong, at least you can say, I did it my way, right? I didn't let somebody else, because if somebody else decided for you what to do and you were wrong, what are you going to do? You can't blame that person. So that's probably the one thing, right? Follow your gut instincts.
Yeah, speaking of gut instincts, you had an instinct on December 8th, 2011 to make a trade. Now, that was middle school for me, Mitch. I wonder, that's a tough time for me to remember. But you had a distinct memory to make a trade for Chris Paul, sending him from the New Orleans Hornets to the Los Angeles Lakers.
Yes.
Pau Gasol, Lamar Odom were supposed to go to the New Orleans Hornets, and the NBA ended up vetoing that trade. Mitch, can you take me through that and what you were feeling during those moments?
Well, Chris is still playing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? So that gives you an idea of the magnitude, of the trade, right, that we thought we had done. And it was done. It was agreed to by the parties. It was a multi-team trade. In our business, general managers have the authority to agree to a trade and execute a trade. It's not like we agree and execute it, and then you get written permission, from the owner. It doesn't work that way. Once the GMs agree, that's all it takes. At that point, you call the league office and you arrange a conference call, and walk through the details of the trade, right? So we had the authority to make a deal. The three teams made a deal, and I'm not sure how many hours later, I remember getting a call from New Orleans, and the GM was distraught, and he was, a little embarrassed. And he said, Mitch, I don't know how to say this, but the NBA is not going to allow our deal, right? And I think one of the other teams was Houston, Daryl Morley, who's in Philly right now. So we all got on the phone, and we didn't know what to do. We couldn't believe it. I informed Dr. Buss. Dr. Buss made some phone calls, and at the end of the day, that was it. The deal, the NBA, vetoed the deal. The team in New Orleans, I don't know what the expression is, was under receivership, maybe, was being sold, and the NBA at some point had some authority. So I don't know what happened. And yeah, I talked to David Stern about it. I didn't ask a lot of questions because I really didn't want to hear it. Unfortunately, I was upset.
Yeah.
And what's done was done. I couldn't undo it. And, it not only did, I mentioned earlier, Chris is still playing, right? But what that did was it killed the deal. Now we had to take back, Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom, and they were never the same.
Wow.
Lamar, could not believe, that he was going to be traded. And I don't think he ever got over it. Okay, it got to the point where the agent called me and said, he can't even come back to the Lakers because he's so upset now.
Wow.
So we ended up trading him to Dallas, right? And I guess we're lucky we were able to make that deal because we at least got an asset. But the player was so much better than the asset we got. But he could not come back to LA and perform. And Pau Gasol was equally hurt, but he did. He was able to fight through it. But quite frankly, he was never the same. So not only did we not get Chris, but the players that were involved in the trade, the damage was done, and it was just. One of those things that doesn't happen very often, and it happened to us, and there was a lot of collateral damage.
Wow. Well, Mitch, you were in the trenches, so I'm sure it was different for you going through that time. Ante, as he told you, he was a little baby. What the hell did he know? But I listen, I wasn't the oldest guy in the world, but I certainly knew what was going on. And from the outside looking in on that situation, everyone felt like the NBA was blocking the Lakers of having another destiny. Did it land another dynasty? Did it land that way with you, Mitch, or were you just so into it? You were upset, obviously, and then you just had to move on? Or did you feel like the league was blocking another Lakers dynasty? They didn't want to see it happen.
Well, I'm not sure if that was the case. I don't really know what happened, right? Something like that does not happen or take place without, NBA leadership being intimately involved, right? And that was David Stern, a great friend and a great NBA trailblazer and leader, and took this league from a league that was really struggling in the late 70s, to a league today that rivals any other league in the world, right?
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to, disparage David Stern. But I did hear that, and I don't know if it's true or not, right? It could be a rumor that there were league meetings going on, And once the story broke, some of the other owners in the room, may have, said, "Oh no, we can't let this," just said stuff like that, right? Like, this
Yep.
is not fair. The Lakers are going to be able to retool again. Now the reality is, it's not like we were getting Chris, for a second round pick, right? We were giving up really, really good players.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think, a lot of people can argue that it was a very fair deal, even as it was. So, what the big deal was, I don't really know.
Yeah.
And like I said, it's water under the bridge. It doesn't really matter right now. And like I said, David's no longer with us, so maybe there's no way we'll ever know.
Yeah. Mitch, I want to ask you about that show Winning Time, because I remember when it was out on HBO, and I remember reading how upset Jerry West was at his portrayal in the show, and I know a lot of the other old school Lakers were upset. So I just wonder, how did that show land with you? Did it bother you? Were you a fan of it? Did you even bother to watch it? I know it's off now, but that show Winning Time, when it was out, how did that show land with you?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I watched, I think, the first episode, with my son Maxwell, who Ante knows, played with together in high school, right?
Yep.
And I didn't see any other episodes other than the first one. Now, I saw some, and the first one, was a little surreal, right? Because, all these people are playing roles of people that I worked with. So it was kind of hard for me to watch. But I saw a lot of clips of how Jerry was portrayed, in the documentary. Oh, not the documentary. It wasn't a documentary. There's another name for it, right? It's a parody. I'm not sure what it is, right? When they exaggerate and kind of use real people's lives,
Yeah.
but they make up a lot, right? There's not a lot of factual basis to it. But I worked with, he was my GM for about 4-5 years, and then I worked with him for 14 years. And what I saw on TV, either that one episode or, in clips, was not the person that I worked with.
Right.
Okay. And I felt, after almost 20 years, I knew him as well as anybody. So the people that produced, directed, and wrote that show took liberties that, maybe they felt would sell, the show and make the show successful and, make them some money or whatever. But there was a lot of damage done. And not only to Jerry, a lot of people were portrayed, in a way that they really weren't. Okay. And I would know, there are other people that are still alive that would know also. But as far as Jerry's concerned, that was upsetting.
Yeah. I watched that show, Mitch, and for a little bit too, and I felt the same way. I was like, these aren't how these people are really like. And actually, Travis bringing up that question got me thinking about like the perception of Kobe Bryant and how people look at him. And I know that publicly there's been some like up and down roller coaster about like, oh, does Kobe like Mitch? Oh, does Kobe? How does Kobe feel about Mitch? But I've also seen from personal accounts like, when things are good, when things are bad, Kobe's been around for you. Can you just talk to us about your relationship with Kobe Bryant and who the real Kobe Bryant is?
Well, first off, my approach to being a general manager was never to get a player to like me or to be friends with the player. I would hope that would happen. But that was never really something that I felt had to take place to be a successful general manager. I always felt that the player had to respect me. And, I don't know what Kobe or how he felt about me. I've known him since he was 17 years old. I was in the room when Dre drafted him in 1996. And ironically, Maxwell, my son, was born on the night of his first game, Kobe's first game, right? So, my memories are pretty vivid of drafting him. and I watched him grow up as a 17-year-old. We had to sign a second contract when he turned 18 because the first one wasn't valid. He was so young. So, I watched him go from a 17-year-old, to what he ended up being when he retired, right? And that's a lot of years.
Yeah.
Jerry retired in 2000. So the majority of Kobe's career, was with me as his general manager.
Mm-hmm.
And some of, his feelings were well documented, right? We struggled for a couple of years going through a little bit of a rebuild, and he wanted to be traded, and that was made public, right?
Yep.
And then we, did some trades, and one of our young players, Andrew Bynum, ended up developing really quickly, and that changed pretty quickly. So at the end of the day, he was fiercely competitive, and I couldn't think of anybody else that was as competitive as him.
Wow.
Or was as single-minded as him. Okay. Now later on in his career, I'm sure he started thinking about, life after basketball.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe that didn't even happen until the last year or so. Those first, I don't even know how many years it was, 12, 14, 16 years.
Yep.
He had on blinders. Everything was about winning. He didn't have much patience, if you didn't feel the same way. Guys like Pau Gasol and Lamar Odom and Derek Fisher, he would ride everybody.
Mm-hmm.
He would ride a rookie, and he would ride guys like that because, he wanted to win, and he knew he had to get those guys to give them their very best. This league is a very unforgiving league. And, everything has to go right for you to be in the finals, right? You have to get a break or two with the officials. You got to get a break or two with injuries. There's a lot that has to happen. And the one part of the equation that he wanted to remove, right, was, the effort and the dedication part. Mm-hmm. So that's how he prepared himself, and he expected the same from everybody else. Even the Hall of Famers.
Well, Kobe had so many players around the league idolizing him. One of them play here in Boston in Jason Tatum. So I have to ask you, as you sort of look at the current champs, how they're constructed, just from an architect standpoint, can you speak to the job that Brad Stevens has done? I mean, obviously, this is a guy who went from coach to the front office. So much like yourself, who went from player to front office, you know all about that difficult transition. So speak to me about what you have seen from Brad Stevens in an executive role and how the Celtics are built. Do you think they're set up, to get a repeat run here, Mitch?
Yeah, by no means am I underplaying Brad's success as a GM, right? But, Danny Ainge started it. Mm-hmm. Okay, just like Jerry West started it for me. When Jerry left, I had Kobe and I had Shaq. That's a pretty good start, for somebody. Mm-hmm. Having said that, Brad's been doing this now 2 or 3 years, and he's made a bunch of moves. Horford. I mean, I'm not even going to start to list them all. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't even have known. He makes what I did for all those years look like something that's pretty easy to do. Okay, with his drafting, his trading, free agent signings. The league is really competitive. Everybody's got to stay healthy. Going into the season, if I had to pick a favorite, I would say Boston's the favorite. Of course, most of the times you say that because you can't, disrespect last year's champions, right?
Right.
They're champions until somebody beats them. But I really believe, putting that aside, that they are the favorite. They're the best team going into the season. And I've gotten to know Brad. We were on some committees together. just a great person. Which in this business, right? That's not how you're graded. You're graded. This is a wins loss oriented business, right? You don't get points for being a good guy. You don't get points, for your team, playing hard and losing. At the end of the day, it's all about winning and losing. And I've gotten to know Brad. I like him a lot, but he's put that team in position not only in the short term. Now they're going to have some challenges going forward.
Yeah.
They know that the league today with the new collective bargaining agreement is very different than it was, 5 or 10 years ago.
Right.
But I'd much rather be in his shoes and try to navigate that in somebody else's shoes.
Yeah, definitely. Mitch, I want to go back to your career, though, for a second. You were a 10-time champion, 3 as a player, 7 times as an executive. Yep. Which titles stand out to you the most?
Ooh.
Well, I have a standard answer when somebody says that, right? It's I don't know if I've earned them, but I got them. Okay. So, yeah, I do have 10, and I debate sometimes whether or not I earned them, but I have them. Well, as a player, there's 2, right? 78 was my first, and I played a lot of minutes. I was healthy. I felt I was at my peak athletically. 85, it was against the Celtics. I learned quickly what the rivalry was like between the Lakers and Boston. And like I said earlier, I was coming back from an injury, and I didn't know if I was going to get back. And if I did, I didn't know how much I'd played, if I'd even be a part of something like that. So in that series, Pat Riley just decides to go with a big lineup, and I'm dragging around a bad leg. But, I played, and I felt like I was a part of it. So if I had to pick between the 2, that would really, really be hard. As a manager, you're not going to like it.
Uh-oh.
But it would be 2010 against Boston. Yeah.
I was waiting all interview long, Mitch. I was just waiting on it. I knew it was coming.
Yep. And not even close. Not even close.
That's too funny, man. That's
great.
Too funny.
That's great. Go ahead, Ted.
All right, man. Look, I got to ask you about Michael Jordan now. You both played at UNC. He was there a little bit after you were. You both played for Dean Smith. But I wanted to know, did you have a relationship with Michael when he was a Tar Heel? And then did you get to see, like, the excellence and know that he was going to be as great as he was after watching him then?
Well, the answer is no. Most games were on TV, but not every game back then. This was, whatever year it was, right? 81, 82, something like that. That's the year I got hurt. I do remember the finals of the NC2A were in New Orleans, and I flew to New Orleans, and I went to the team hotel, and I'm in the lobby, and the assistant coach for North Carolina, Bill Guthridge, is standing against the wall, and I start talking to him, and he was the assistant coach when I was there, right? So we're talking, and he goes, "Mitch, I want you to meet somebody." So there's somebody walking through the lobby, and he calls over, I think they called him Mike then. I'm not sure. I think it was Mike Jordan. And then when he made the shot against Cleveland, I think it turned into Michael, but I'm not sure. Okay, so he called him over, and that's when I met him. He was a freshman. Okay, it was championship weekend, and we spoke. I don't know. To me, I felt he was a little shy, right? Maybe all the people in the lobby, half the people did not recognize him, did not know who he was, right? And we talked for maybe, I don't know, half a minute, whatever, right? And when he walks away, Coach Guthridge looks at me and he goes, that guy has a chance to be a pretty good player one day. Okay. So I looked at him and said, "Oh, really?" Right? So that was, 81, 82. Okay. And that's when I first met him. Over the years before I would work with him, we would have, marginal contact, at a Carolina function. His first championship was against us in 1990.
Wow.
Okay, against the Lakers, yeah. And yeah, and then our college coach Dean Smith would organize golf tournaments in a town in North Carolina called Pinehurst, and he would invite back some Carolina guys and other coaches with a college or NBA that he liked that can play golf. I think he liked me, but I wasn't a very good golfer, so I didn't get invited because I was a good golfer. I think he liked me, okay. But Michael would come to those, okay, and we would play together in a foursome, and then afterwards, there'd be a big dinner. So, that was my relationship, with him, prior to coming to work for him.
Yeah. Can I ask you, what is he like now? People want to know, the people want to know what Michael Jordan is like now today.
Well, what's he like now and today?
Rich.
Yeah, I don't think that was ever a problem. He's fiercely competitive still.
Yeah.
I've gone down. He lives in Florida, right? I've gone down and I've played golf with him. We would meet about the Hornets, all day, like on a Tuesday, and then on a Wednesday, he built a golf course, so we would go play golf at his golf course, and then have dinner afterwards, right? Very competitive, goes without saying he does like to play golf. Buried in the game, really tough, for him to be patient and, build out the team. I'm not sure going forward that he was comfortable with, the direction, the NBA was heading, and there's no way to actually verify that, the NBA with, the salaries and the rules and all the exposure and player maintenance, I think, and quite frankly, a lot that stuff has bothered me a lot too, right? Just adjusting, the way the player is today versus the player 30 years ago. So I'm not sure if that, bothered him or not. But he did decide to sell the team, and I believe he still has a small portion of the team. And when I took the job, I knew, at least he told me down the road, he was going to look to sell the team. I think it came a couple of years earlier than I thought. So I know that was a part of his plan. But he's old school.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure he would fit into today's player. The way it is today. And, if you just look at, what those teams, Miami, New York, Detroit, did to him, trying to defend him, back then, you drive the paint, you leave the ground, you're in the air, and you literally get tackled.
Right.
To the ground, everybody jumps up, like I said earlier, they're acting like they're going to fight. And I'll be honest with you, some of those skirmishes were pretty real with those teams, right? But the referees would step in between you. And then once things settle down, everybody goes to the free throw line and nobody gets thrown out, nobody gets suspended. The 3-point shot was very different. There was hand checking back then. So it's a totally different game. Guys like Michael and Jerry West, I mean, under today's rules, they could have averaged 40 to 45 points a game.
Woo. Wow.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt.
Wow. Mitch, that's actually my last question for you. We'll let you go with this. You brought this up, the salaries, the rules. I mean, Mitch, you are a big guy. You have bigs now shooting from the parking lot. I mean, it's unbelievable. These guys are pulling up from the logo. As you sort of look at the new age NBA and the new way basketball is played, you know, you mentioned it took you a while to even get used to it. I mean, do you love this for the game? The way the game is played now, does it bode well for the future? Are you concerned? Like, how do you sort of put a bow on the current game, so to speak, and the current player?
Yeah, I've got no problem with the product today, and apparently, you know, there's millions of people that don't have a problem either. You know, the recent TV deal,
Yeah.
you know, dwarfs the deal that was in place before it. And really, at the end of the day, you know, the buildings are sold out. People are watching on TV. You know, the older fan, you know, like myself, you know, there's less and less of us around, right? So it's really a game for, you know, for younger, the kids, you know, whether it's junior high or high school or college, you know, they don't sit in front of a TV anymore with a clicker, right, and go back and forth. You know, they're looking at short segments, you know, on their cell phone. You know, they're texting each other, you know, great plays in the middle of a game. I'm not sure how often, you know, young people sit down and actually watch a 2.5, 3 hour game.
Right.
You know, they're recording or they're whatever, right? It's just so different today.
Yeah.
But the game is more popular today than it's ever been, and you know, I think it's great. You know, maybe, you know, every now and then I say something to myself when I played, you know, right? But no one that means nothing. I think it's great. These guys today, you know, maybe it's not as physical, right? Maybe we had some different rules, but their skill level, like you mentioned earlier, even the big guys to be able to pull up and shoot a three like they do. You know, some of the passes that we see, you know, Steph Curry, what this guy does, you know, shooting the ball, it's mesmerizing. So I think the game's in a great spot, and I can't wait tomorrow, right, for opening night.
Absolutely. Well, Mitch, you know, I know Ante wants to say some special stuff to you on the way out of here. I know you guys are tight, but I really appreciate you taking out the time and joining us here on Hold My Banner. Let's do it again soon. Appreciate it, Mitch.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Mitch. Appreciate you. See you soon, dog. All right. Go Tar Heels. Go Tar Heels.
Okay, go Tar Heels. All right, guys.
See you,
Enjoyed
Mitch.
it.
Thank you.